and we're good to go.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm going to share my screen if it's possible. I'd like to acknowledge, like everybody, the traditional owners, and in particular the places we're all calling from and in Perth, but also note the long-term health impacts of colonisation, the ongoing health impacts of colonisation. Today I've been asked to drill down a bit more specifically on AUKUS in terms of Pillar 1 and the naval nuclear reactors and nuclear waste. Specifically talking about safety and security risks, I think fundamentally the safety and security risks are the whole deal itself. I will get more specific, but I have to just say that the complete lock-in that we have, Kurt Campbell, the US Defence Deputy Secretary of State, spells it out quite clearly in an indiscreet comment. And this is an incredibly high-risk project. The risk-benefit analysis is never going to work. There's so many things that can go wrong, and I've listed them down the bottom of the slide. In addition, the US, we've had Keating, we've had Bob Carr, Gareth Evans saying what an appalling situation this deal is. And the US is so confident that they are actually getting frustrated with us because the government is not talking down the ministers that are the previous government ministers that are critics of the pact. So we're pretty a long way down the track in terms of being a US dependency in their eyes, and certainly I think in some government eyes. So getting to the specifics of the naval nuclear reactors, as I said, I think the risk of that pact itself is much higher than these risks, but we'll go into each of these in detail. So there's 4 aspects I'm going to talk about. Normal operation, then if there's any leak or accident, then if there's a meltdown, and then if we become a nuclear target. The nuclear target issue is a live one for Pine Gap, it's a live one for Tyndall, Northwest Cape, and soon it will be for Garden Island. There are concerns with this very highly enriched uranium fuel that's going to be transferred to Australia. It's the first time this weapons-grade material has been transferred to a non-nuclear weapons state. And there are major problems in terms of that setting a precedent, increasing the risk of nuclear war, destabilising region, and potentially an arms race. So it undermines the Fissile Material Cut-off Treaty. The promised world's practice best safeguards are virtually impossible to enforce given the US secrecy around what this fuel is and how it is provided and sustained. And also these submarines by their nature are supposedly stealth platforms that can disappear for 6 months at a time. It's very hard to safeguard material on a platform like that. There are the radiation risks to submariners, which are similar to those to radiation workers in other industries, so in medical industries and also in nuclear power plants. The more exposure you have to radiation, the greater health impacts there are in terms of increased cancers, heart attacks, strokes, etc. I don't need to tell you in the WA how appalling the process has been in terms of consultation, information and waste. So the consultation, for those of you who haven't been aware of it, was entirely secret and all of it has been withheld. MAPW wrote to IPAN, the regulatory body on radiation, to say why was this and how outrageous it was. They basically wrote back and said, well, this facility is outside our remit. We're only able to do regard to regulate nuclear reactors for research and production of radioactive materials for industry and medicine, or for preparation or storage of nuclear fuel. So they felt that they were doing a service by actually having a consultation at all. But I think they were a bit locked into what they could provide. Many of you would have seen the appalling public relations brochure that was given to us as information about the facility. It was breathtaking in its hypocrisy, talking about good communication, building trust and confidence. There was very poor community consultation. I'm not aware of any First Nations consultation. I think Dorinda Cox will probably go into that A junket was provided for council members, and who knows what else was provided that we don't actually know about. The misleading information within that brochure, again, they tried to health wash the waste. They said that the low-level radioactive waste was similar to that in hospitals. Well, the vast majority of nuclear waste from hospitals, which comes from quite a specialised area called nuclear medicine, it's not X-rays, it's not CAT scans, it's not MRIs, not even radiotherapy. Anyway, the waste that comes from those loses its radioactivity so fast that after a couple of months, it can go to a normal rubbish tip. The waste that they're talking about here from the naval nuclear reactors needs 300 years. This is the low-level waste. The hazard assessment was breathtaking. There was going to be no consequences. And the posturing on standards, BAE, which is going to be one of the big players in submarine build overall, talks about substituting international best practice with relevant good practice. Now, relevant good practice is what they do in the UK, and it just means they do what they want. And the jobs, whenever there's a terrible proposition, they always justify it with jobs. And Brown University has done an excellent costs of war study going for many years. It shows very clearly that when you compare spending in defence with health, education, and renewables, you get many more jobs for the same expenditure. Alexander Downer was scathing, talking about it being a misconceived economic project which was financially untenable and politically a fantasy, and I think he's nailed it. And not to mention terribly damaging to Australian capability and independence. IPAN itself, a couple of years ago, their Safety Council wrote about concerns. It's clear that the facility will be regulated for radiation leaks, but it will report to the Defence Minister, which is a huge conflict of interest. And very likely, because that conflict of interest, we may never know there's a leak. And they talked about inadequate separation of responsibilities means it's a risk to public safety. Rockingham Council wrote when they were doing an exercise in terms of practicing nuclear waste management, and nothing will happen until the controlled industrial facility is finished, hopefully in 2027. But then went on to talk about the unmatched safety records of the United Kingdom and the United States. Again, a breathtakingly hypocritical statement. The waste issues have been contested for many decades in Australia. Low-level waste needs about 300 years to be kept away from the environment, and intermediate-level waste needs to be kept away from the environment for about 10,000 years. Most of Australia's intermediate-level waste is at Lucas Heights. This is what the British nuclear subs nuclear waste management looks like in part. Some of those subs, about half, have had their nuclear reactors taken out, but about half of them haven't. And they're basically sitting in harbour, rusting away. They're being maintained at great expense, but this is a major unsolved problem. And the legislation that was going to go through Parliament was going to mean that we would end up with waste potentially from the US and UK submarines. Well, we seem to look like the amendment's gone through to stop that, but even so, for our own submarines, if we do have them ever, the nuclear waste remains an unsolved problem. So that was all normal operation. If we have leaks and accidents, we keep getting told this is 100% safe. You know, there was a slow leak in a nuclear submarine a few years ago. And in fact, just last week, it was reported that a Chinese submarine sank in May or June this year. The UK experience since 2017 has been entirely hidden, and I'll talk a bit more about that. But I am sceptical. The pressure not to discuss leaks or accidents from the Australian government and the US government would be very high, because if there were a leak or an accident, the pressure to stop having submarines rotate through the base would be high. So it remains to be seen. Again, saying it's 100% safe, we know 7 nuclear-powered subs have been sunk, including 2 from the US, in 1989. So we're talking quite a while ago. Greenpeace said that 48 nuclear warheads have been lost at sea. The IEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, provides some data, but says it's incomplete because of secrecy, and none is available since 2015. And there's many things that can happen, sort of fires, flooding, collision, running aground. So this 100% safe is really an interesting statement again. The UK experience is very depressing in that since 2017, it has been, prior to 2017, the public knew that there was numerous breaches, numerous safety breaches, and that the regulator was underfunded and understaffed and unable to properly function. Then, since then, freedom of information applications have been rejected and overruled that in the safety issues have been overruled by security issues. And I don't know enough about the US, it's less transparent there, but that's pretty, it's now 7 years of no information. Third functional issue is a core meltdown. The best information I could get was from the State Hazard Plan, which says that it's physically impossible for the reactor core to explode. Well, that's a nice statement. I've approached an expert who's yet to get back to me about whether that's actually true or not. The problem with repeatedly saying things that are untrue is that you really start to doubt everything. So if there were a core meltdown, they would apparently be primarily contained within the vessel, and there would also possibly be some gaseous leakages. And again, the risks that they state is very, very low. So for a 4 to 5 day visit, less than 1 million per reactor per year. I suppose it's an improvement on saying there's no risk at all. In the event of an accident, what happens? In WA, police take over. This vessel gets removed to sea if it's possible to be operated. Decontamination is done as it can be, and then the shelter in place or evacuation depends on how far you are and how big the release is. So 600 metres, everybody leaves, hiding everybody, 2.8 evacuation for kids, and up to 15 kilometres depending on the wind strength and how much radiation is released. Finally, the worst case scenario, which would be if we were a nuclear target. This is representing a 1 megaton bomb, and basically, I think some fairly conservative estimates from a good Michael West article that over 1,000 people would die and about 20,000 would be injured. Most people in the initial thermal area, so that's the light brown area, will die either immediately or in the first few days from burns or thermal injury itself. There'll be no phone coverage, no internet, limited food and water. Presumably the rest of the state will come in to react, but it's a pretty bleak prospect, and depends on the size of the bomb as to size of the actual weapon as to how wide this circle goes. A 5 megaton bomb includes Perth. And fallout again depends on wind strength. So this is again a 1 megaton bomb, and these are the levels of radiations for each area under the wind. Yep. So it's a real gallop through the nuts and bolts of the facility they're proposing. What should happen if we, really ditching AUKUS 1 and 2 clearly is the optimal solution, but small things we can ask for. Copy Malcolm Fraser, who said to the US, you cannot do this, not confirm or deny whether they're carrying nuclear weapons. We have to say they are not ever going to carry nuclear weapons. The US needs to ratify the South Pacific Nuclear Free Zone Treaty. The nuclear regulator should be reporting to the health minister, and we should explicitly reject intermediate and high-level waste from the allies, the AUKUS allies. And for the waste site, we need to reinforce that current state and federal laws still apply, and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, Australia needs to reinforce commitment to that. We need proper community consultation, and we need clearly spelled out the euphemistically called political commitments associated with AUKUS, because in so many ways we're being sold something we don't even know what we're buying. Thank you.